Picture this. December 5, 1945. The sun is still hanging low over Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 5 United States Navy Avenger torpedo bombers, powerful, battle-proven machines, lift off the runway in perfect formation. This is Flight 19, a routine training run, nothing more. The weather is clear, the pilots are experienced. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight leader, has logged thousands of hours in the air. He has done this before. They all have. 2 hours into the mission, something changes. The radio crackles. And what comes through is not a status update, not a routine check-in. It is something that no one on the ground is prepared to hear. Everything is wrong. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should. That was the last coherent message from Flight 19. 5 aircraft, 14 men, gone, not crashed in a way that leaves wreckage. Not downed in a way that leaves oil slicks or bodies floating on the surface. Just gone. The ocean swallowed them completely and gave nothing back. And then, as if the sea hadn't already taken enough, a rescue plane was dispatched to find them. A Martin Mariner, built for exactly this kind of search mission. 13 men aboard. It lifted off into the gathering dark. It never came back either. No debris, no emergency beacons, no trace of 27 men and 6 aircraft except for a single chilling transmission cut short by static. The Atlantic had opened its mouth and swallowed them whole. Welcome to the Bermuda Triangle. 500,000 square miles of ocean stretching between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. A patch of blue water that has consumed ships, planes, and entire crews across 3 centuries and still offers no explanation. Governments have investigated it. Scientists have theorized about it. Conspiracy theorists have built entire careers around it. And yet, the Triangle keeps its secrets. Today, we are going deep, past the myths, past the Hollywood versions and the alien theories, into the actual historical record, the real disappearances, the genuine scientific anomalies, and the uncomfortable truth about what we do and don't know about this stretch of ocean. Because the Bermuda Triangle is not just a legend. It is a mirror that reflects something fundamental about the human relationship with the unknown. And what stares back is not always comfortable. Let's start at the beginning. The name Bermuda Triangle didn't exist until 1964. That's important, because the disappearances existed long before anyone had a name for the pattern. Sailors had been calling this stretch of ocean the Sea of Doom for centuries. Spanish colonial records from the 1500s describe ships lost without explanation in these waters. In 1840, a French merchant vessel called the Rosalie was found drifting off Nassau. Sails set, cargo intact, not a single person aboard. Just an empty ship drifting in calm seas like a ghost. But it was writer Vincent Gaddis who crystallized the modern mythology. In a 1964 article for Argosy magazine, he coined the phrase the deadly Bermuda Triangle and mapped the rough boundaries of the zone. The article became a sensation. Charles Berlitz turned the idea into a best-selling book in 1974. Hollywood followed. And suddenly, this patch of ocean had a brand, a reputation, a name that made people nervous just to say out loud. But here's what gets lost in the mythology. The disappearances that gave birth to the legend are real, documented, verified. Whatever caused them, something happened out there. And some of those cases are so staggering in scale that they deserve to be heard without the noise of the myth surrounding them. March 1918. The United States has been in the First World War for less than a year. The USS Cyclops is one of the Navy's largest and most capable fuel ships, a massive collier vessel, over 500 feet long, capable of carrying 11,000 tons of cargo. She is returning from Brazil, loaded with manganese ore, carrying 306 passengers and crew. She passes through the Bermuda Triangle Zone, and then nothing. No distress signal, no SOS, no debris field, no oil, no bodies, nothing. The USS Cyclops simply ceased to exist somewhere between Barbados and the Chesapeake Bay. The Navy launched one of the most extensive search operations in its history up to that point. They found nothing. To this day, the disappearance of the USS Cyclops remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in the entire history of the United States Navy. 306 people, and not a single clue as to what happened to them. President Woodrow Wilson said, and I quote directly from historical record, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." No theory has ever fully explained it. The ship was not in a storm. It was not old or poorly maintained. It was a modern, well-crewed naval vessel traveling a known route in peacetime. And it vanished. Completely. Without a trace. The triangle's first corners were established long before Vincent Gaddis gave it a name. They were established in moments like this. Moments where the ocean simply refused to give back what it took. The Cyclops is not unique. It is merely the largest. The triangle's history reads like a casualty list with no accompanying battle. The Star Tiger and Star Ariel, two British passenger aircraft, vanished in 1948 and 1949 respectively over these waters. The Marine Sulphur Queen, a converted tanker carrying 39 crew, disappeared in 1963 with no wreckage found for weeks. The Witchcraft, a cabin cruiser that vanished just 1 mile off the coast of Miami in 1967 after its owner radioed to say everything was fine and he just needed a small tow, and was never seen again, despite a search beginning within 19 minutes of his call. The pattern is not that ships and planes crash in the triangle. Ships and planes crash everywhere in the world. The pattern is that in the triangle they often disappear completely. No wreckage, no survivors, no explanation, just empty ocean where something used to be. So what's actually happening out there? Here is where we have to be honest, because there are people on both extremes of this conversation who will mislead you. On one side, you have the true believers who attribute every triangle disappearance to alien abductions, interdimensional portals, or the lost city of Atlantis pulling ships into its underwater energy fields. On the other side, you have hardcore skeptics who dismiss the entire triangle as a statistical myth invented by a magazine writer and amplified by bad journalism. The truth, as usual, sits somewhere in the middle. And the actual science of what goes on in this region of the Atlantic is frankly stranger than most of the conspiracy theories. The Bermuda Triangle sits near one of only two places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align perfectly, a phenomenon called an agonic line. Everywhere else on the planet, a compass points to magnetic north, which is slightly offset from true geographic north. Navigators account for this offset, called magnetic declination, when plotting courses. But near the agonic line, the declination is 0. Compasses appear to point true north. The problem is that navigators trained in other parts of the world, especially in the age before GPS, were trained to correct for declination. When that correction is applied in a region where no correction is needed, the result is a navigational error that compounds with every mile traveled. A ship that believes it is sailing due east when it is actually sailing east-northeast doesn't notice the error immediately. Over hours, the error becomes miles. Over a full voyage, it can mean the difference between making port and running onto a reef you didn't know was there. This doesn't explain all the disappearances, but it explains some of them in a way that is far more unsettling than any supernatural theory, because it means experienced, Professional navigators with good equipment made fatal errors simply because the physics of this particular part of the ocean behaved differently than what their training prepared them for. Beneath the floor of the Atlantic Ocean in the Bermuda Triangle region, there are vast deposits of methane hydrate, essentially frozen natural gas locked into the seafloor sediment. Under certain conditions, these deposits can destabilize and release enormous quantities of methane gas in a sudden, violent eruption. Here is what that means for a ship caught above such an eruption. The methane gas rising through the water dramatically reduces its density. A ship floats because water is denser than the ship itself. When the water beneath a ship is suddenly replaced by a churning column of gas bubbles, the effective density of that water column drops. Ships that were floating comfortably can lose buoyancy almost instantly, sinking so fast that no distress signal is possible. No time to launch lifeboats. No time to even understand what is happening. The ship is simply there, and then it isn't. This is not a theory invented to explain the triangle. Methane hydrate eruptions have been documented in other parts of the world. The seafloor geology of the Bermuda Triangle region makes such eruptions plausible. Scientists have found craters on the Norwegian seafloor that were apparently created by exactly this kind of methane release. Whether similar events have occurred in the triangle, we cannot say with certainty, but the mechanism is real, the physics work, and it would explain with brutal efficiency why ships sometimes disappear without leaving so much as floating debris. The Bermuda Triangle sits at the confluence of three major ocean systems. The Gulf Stream, one of the most powerful ocean currents on Earth, runs directly through this region, carrying warm water north along the American eastern seaboard. Caribbean storm systems, some of the most intense on the planet, frequently push into this zone. And cold northern Atlantic waters meet warm tropical waters here in a constant churning boundary. The result is a region that is prone to rogue waves. Waves that emerge suddenly, with no warning, reaching heights of 60, 70, even 80 feet under certain conditions. Modern maritime research has confirmed that rogue waves are not mythological. They are real. They are predictable in the sense that we know what conditions produce them, and they can strike with such speed and force that a ship's crew may have no time to send a distress signal before the wave simply overwhelms them. A ship struck broadside by an 80-foot rogue wave in the middle of the Atlantic doesn't necessarily leave much evidence. The wave doesn't care about size. And in a region where the Gulf Stream can carry any floating wreckage hundreds of miles away from the point of impact within hours, a search party arriving the next morning would find nothing. Empty water. Just like always, before we get to the most chilling disappearance in the Triangle's modern history, one that happened in the age of GPS, of satellites, of instant communication, a case that has no excuse for being unexplained. I want to pause for a second, because I've laid out the science, the agonic lines, the methane hydrates, the rogue waves. And some of you are nodding. You're saying, okay, that explains it. It's physics, it's geology. There's no mystery here, but here's what I want to know from you. Right now, in the comments. Because we're talking about a zone of ocean that has consumed hundreds of vessels across centuries, that has swallowed Navy battleships without leaving a bolt. That took 27 men in one night and gave back nothing. Do you believe there is a logical, scientific explanation for everything the Bermuda Triangle has taken? Or do you think there is something else out there? Something we don't have the framework to understand yet? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you are the kind of person who is drawn to these deep ocean mysteries, the unexplained, The documented, the cases that scientists and governments still can't close, then make sure you are subscribed. We go this deep every single week. New video every Thursday. And you do not want to miss what's coming next now. Let's talk about a ship that was found perfectly intact, with food still cooking on the stove, sails perfectly set, and not a single human being aboard, January 31st, 1921. The Cape Hatteras lighthouse keeper spots a 5-masted commercial schooner drifting toward the shoals of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. The ship is moving wrong, no controlled movement, just drifting with the current. Signal flags produce no response. After several days of attempts, a Coast Guard cutter manages to board her. What they find will be debated for 100 years. The Carol A. Deering is completely intact. No structural damage, no signs of a storm having torn through the vessel. The sails are fully set, as if the crew had been sailing and simply stepped away for a moment. In the galley, the ship's kitchen, food is being prepared. Pots on the stove, a meal in progress abandoned mid-preparation, and not a single person on board. 11 crew members. Gone, the lifeboats are missing. The ship's anchors are rigged in a way that suggests the crew had been preparing to drop anchor, but didn't. The navigation equipment is missing. The logbook, which would have recorded the ship's last known position and events, is gone. The crew's personal belongings remain in their quarters. They did not pack. They did not plan to leave. They simply were not there. The investigation that followed was one of the most extensive maritime inquiries in American history. The State Department got involved, the Commerce Department, the Navy, multiple government agencies pored over every piece of evidence. They interviewed witnesses at every port the Deering had visited on her final voyage. They tracked down rumors of mutiny, of piracy, of rum runners operating in these waters during Prohibition. They found nothing conclusive. The 3 leading theories each has evidence in its favor and a fatal flaw that prevents certainty. Mutiny. The Deering's captain, William Merritt, had reportedly complained about his crew, calling them difficult and disobedient, to harbor officials in Barbados before the fatal voyage. The first mate was allegedly drunk and disorderly in that same port. A mutiny in which the crew overtook the officers, then abandoned ship themselves, would explain the missing lifeboats and the missing officers' logs. It would not explain why the crew would abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship in the middle of the ocean. Piracy. In 1921, the waters off Cape Hatteras were active with rum runners exploiting Prohibition. There are documented cases of pirates operating in these waters during this period. Not the romantic pirates of the Golden Age, but violent criminals willing to board vessels and murder crews for cargo. The Deering's cargo manifest included nothing particularly valuable, but a boat, sails, and supplies have value in their own right. The problem with the piracy theory is the lack of violence evidence aboard. Ships taken by pirates of this era didn't tend to leave the galley with food cooking and belongings neatly in place. The Bermuda Triangle. And then there is the theory that what happened to the Carol A. Deering was the same thing that happened to the Cyclops, and Flight 19 and the Witchcraft. That something in this zone of ocean, something we lack the scientific vocabulary to properly describe, reached up and took 11 men off a perfectly good ship and left the ship behind as a calling card, as evidence of its existence, as proof that it had been there. The Carol A. Deering remains moored permanently in the harbor of historical mystery, her anchor never dropped, her crew never found, her fate never explained. Here is a fact that the Bermuda Triangle mythology rarely acknowledges. The World Wildlife Fund which conducted a comprehensive study of the world's most dangerous shipping lanes, does not list the Bermuda Triangle among them. The Lloyd's of London insurance market, which has a very direct financial interest in understanding where ships are most likely to be lost, does not charge higher premiums for ships sailing through the Triangle. Statistically, the Triangle is not the deadliest patch of ocean on Earth. It's not even in the top 10. The North Sea, the South China Sea, the waters off the coast of Bangladesh, these kill more ships and more sailors per year than the Triangle does. So what's actually going on? Part of the answer is confirmation bias. When a ship disappears in the Bermuda Triangle, it becomes a data point for the legend. When a ship disappears off the coast of Malaysia, it's a maritime accident. The triangle is a frame that we apply to certain losses and not others, and the frame creates the pattern. Another part of the answer is geography. The triangle is one of the most heavily traveled stretches of ocean in the world. Miami is one of the busiest ports in the Western Hemisphere. More ships passing through means more ships occasionally lost, which means more raw numbers, which means more fodder for the legend. And yet, the USS Cyclops. 27 men lost in one night in clear weather. A rescue ship that went to find them and joined them in whatever ending awaited. The Carol A. Deering, with its cooking food and its ghost ship emptiness and its 11 missing souls. Flight 19's final radio transmission, with its haunting acknowledgement that something about the ocean looked wrong before they fell silent forever. These are not statistical abstractions. These are real events with real names, real families left behind, real investigations that ran into walls. The Triangle may not be the deadliest ocean in the world, but it has produced some of the most genuinely inexplicable maritime mysteries ever recorded, and inexplicable in this context means exactly what it sounds like. We cannot explain them, not fully, not satisfyingly. The investigations hit dead ends. The evidence runs out. The ocean keeps its secrets. There is a psychological truth buried beneath the Bermuda Triangle mythology, and it's worth naming directly. We are drawn to the Triangle not because we believe in sea monsters or alien abductions. We are drawn to it because it represents a specific kind of fear that is very difficult to articulate in a world that increasingly explains everything. The fear of disappearing without a trace. Not dying, not crashing, not sinking in a way that leaves wreckage and explanation and closure, just ceasing to exist. Being here and then not being here, and leaving behind no evidence that you were ever here at all. In a world of GPS and satellite tracking and instant communication, the idea that something can simply vanish is deeply, fundamentally unsettling. It violates our sense of how the modern world works. We are supposed to be findable. We are supposed to be trackable. We are supposed to leave evidence. The Bermuda Triangle says no. Sometimes things go into the ocean and the ocean does not give them back. No evidence, no explanation, no closure, just the water, which was there before we arrived and will be there long after we are gone, and which owes us absolutely nothing. Perhaps the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is not really about the triangle at all. Perhaps it's about us, about our need to understand, to explain, to close the loop on every story. And the triangle's deepest, most disturbing power is its refusal to cooperate with that need. It doesn't give us answers, it gives us questions. And then it gives us more ocean. The sea doesn't care about our theories. It doesn't care about our investigations. It certainly doesn't care about our legends. It simply continues, as it has for millions of years before us, doing exactly what it has always done, taking things and keeping them. Perhaps the mystery isn't why things disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. Perhaps it's why we are so desperate to believe that something, anything, must be responsible. Because the alternative, the real answer that the evidence keeps suggesting, is somehow worse than any monster. That sometimes the ocean just takes things. For no reason, with no purpose, without malice or mystery or meaning. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing, waiting in the deep.